Okay, hello. This is my lesson number 14 on a series of lectures on how the United States is starting a new Cold War with Russia. Alright, we're focusing on Russia. And the topic is, I say, perhaps the key trigger that set off this new Cold War, alright, was Russia's annexation of Crimea. Alright, but the question is, right, was it really proof of Russian expansionist ambitions, or was it Russia once again being shoved onto the defensive, right? Was it a defensive move after being jammed by the U.S. with a threat? Okay, all right, same pattern. Now, I'm going to split this lecture into two lectures, lecture 14 and 15. I'll show you where I start in 15 down here. All right, and the reason why I want to do this is, I prefer to go through the whole thing in one shot, but it's just too much information. It's going to be information overload on people, and it's going to come down to a matter of just endurance. People are getting tired. Like, oh, enough already. They'll be screaming the Roberto Duran. No mas, no mas. Okay. All right. So to begin, the setting of this annexation of Crimea was this: in February of 2014. The pro-West Euromaidan group stole power in Ukraine, increasing the risk of Ukraine joining NATO, which jammed Russia with a serious strategic threat. So, in response to this, Russia annexed Crimea. Right? The USA involvement in the pro-West movement was direct in the form of $5 billion of U.S. government money. All right. Now, it's not just money. They're not going to throw money at it. There's going to be consultations. There's going to be communication. There's going to be planning, advice. But we'll just keep it at money because that's what we know. All right. And the de facto direct form of USA support for these groups were through NGOs. That stands for non-government organizations, which is kind of a misnomer because a lot of these organizations are directly funded by the U.S. government. So one example is probably the granddaddy of these NGOs, a guy named Alan Weinstein. He's a founder of the NED, called the National Endowment for Democracy. Right? Sounds good. Right? But what he said was, and we'll get to his exact words later, I don't have room for it here, but he said these NGOs do the same government destabilization and overthrow done by the CIA, but with, quote, flat potential close to zero, right? No blowback, right? No bad press, no people yelling, CIA is doing, right? All right, so here's Alan Weinstein, and I'll examine NGOs in greater depth in the second lesson. All right, breaking that apart. All right, exactly what they do and how it's essentially no different from what the CIA classic playbook game plan for overthrowing a government is. All right, so next I say I expect an attack or a debate. So to show you that USA actions here are fully intentional, let's examine the long pattern of direct U.S. attacks and threats. So this is to set what do they say in the court of law? To establish a pattern, behavior, right? What else? I don't know. Okay. All right. So at least 16 times the USA has directly threatened or attacked Russia. All right. So with 16 times, you think it's a pattern? All right. Come on. So the first goes way back to 1982 during the Reagan administration when the U.S. attempted to block development of the Soviet Union's Orangoi pipeline. Remember the pipeline over here? There's Orangoi fields here. Here's like Yamal fields, right? These went down here. Okay. Now the thing is, when we do this, I mean, I just know that Americans don't even blink an eye. They don't even pay attention to this. Like, oh, okay, that sounds good to me, right? But you know what? If some other country did this to us, right, we'd scream bloody murder. We'd go literally ape shit, people would go bonkers mad, all right? So now in 1996, 99, U.S. government pushed to promote non-Russian Turkmenistan gas. Remember I said Turkmenistan is down here, and it is sixth largest natural gas reserves in the world. All right. It's going to have to go across the Caspian through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and then one way or another. Back then, they weren't sure either across the Black Sea or through Turkey to get to Europe. All right, and then in 2001, the U.S. Develops plans to overthrow the governments of 7 Russian client states in 5 years. All right, that included Iraq, Libya, Iran, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Lebanon. All right, and that's according to General Wesley Clark, 4-star General, Supreme Commander of NATO. All right, and he got that direct from the horse's mouth. A general in the Pentagon who had a copy of the memorandum from Rumsfeld-Wolfowitz. All right. Yeah. What happened? We took down Iraq. What happened? We definitely helped take down Libya. All right. Iran. We're squeezing Iran. The Arab Spring, which was supported by U.S. NGOs, spread to Syria. So that helped. That was a key thing that started the civil war there. Made Syria a mess. All right. And in 2002, U.S. unilaterally abrogated the ABM treaty for utterly bogus reasons. Right? They stated it has to be a combination of WMD and ballistic missiles. Well, who has both of these, right? Right? And the only country who has a ballistic missile that can hit anywhere near Europe is Iran, right? And it can only reach part of Romania. I'm not going to get into the whole ridiculous discussion again. This is like a joke. How do they sell this to politicians? All right, and in 2003, the U.S. invades Iraq and flips it from being a Russian client state to a U.S. client state, buying all U.S. weapons. All right, and it's more than just weapons. We make money there. All right, and in 2008, there's a concerted push by the USA, Senate, House, and President all together to get both Ukraine and Georgia into NATO at a time when Ukraine was screwing Russia on gas, and Russia was desperate to bypass Ukraine. All right, and they're trying to get MAP, accelerated membership to NATO. All right, now they joined NATO. That's going to give NATO military umbrella to protect all sorts of bad Ukraine behaviors, screwing Russia. All right, and Russia. Here's some evidence of their attempts to bypass Ukraine. First is the 2003 Blue Stream. Then in 2005, Yamal. Then in 2011, they built Nord Stream 1. Then in 2012, they're starting to build the South Stream. All to bypass Ukraine here. Right? And that was blocked after they took Crimea here. There's sanctions that blocked this, right? So then they built Turk Stream here. Turk Stream runs about here to right there, that part, northern part of Turkey there. And then they're working on a Nord Stream 2, which we're attacking. And then they're working on the Turk Stream 2, which we're attacking. All right. And in 2011, U.S. military operations to overthrow the government of Libya, all right, which is a Russian client state. Now, U.S. warships were involved and U.S. aircraft. I'm not sure where the aircraft are flying out of. Probably Germany, I'm guessing. Maybe Italy, I don't know. Italy, I don't know where they're flying out of. Anyway, it doesn't matter. All right, so U.S. ships and aircraft, and they're firing weapons, a lot of cruise missiles, and I'm sure they're dropping laser-guided bombs. I wasn't following that closely as far as what the weapons were. Which spread to and they were targeted by U.S. agents on the ground in Libya. All right, then in 2011, U.S. NGO supported the Arab Spring, which spread to Syria. Right, Arab Spring was started in North Africa, but it spread to Syria, and that sparked a civil war there that fragmented Russia's sole remaining client state in the Middle East. I mean, that's all they got left, Syria. Right. So what's the situation in both of those? They're both divided, failed states. They're both hotbeds for ISIS to take root. All right. So here's Libya. Here's the government portion. This tiny portion. I mean, more powerful because they got the oil is the anti-government faction here, right? And this is like a tribal group. I don't know what the hell exactly this is. A bunch of tribes. Anyways, so this is all fragmented. This is a failed state. They're fighting. It's a mess over there, which makes it a fertile ground for ISIS to come in and take root. And then same thing happened with Syria. Syria's a mess. You got civil war. It's all bloody. Both of them are bloody. A lot of killing. Both destroyed their economies. All right. And Syria is fragmented. This is the government portion under Assad still, allied with Russia. They still got Tarsus over here. Their naval base, right? They're gonna fight to keep that, right? Here's a Kurdish section, and then the rest is all split up on these other different groups, It's a mess. All right, so that's all they got left. I mean, come on, all right? 2014, there's U.S. sanctions on Russia after Russia's annexation of Crimea, right? And those sanctions, also known as Ukraine Freedom Support Act, right? And that causes Russia to do an e-shift towards China, trying to make China the big gas market, all right? That's good. Yeah, bring the two superpower threats together. Yeah, that's great. All right. Okay, 2016. The USA ABM system in Romania is made operational, and that jams Russia with a nuclear threat. All right, we're threatening them again. And it's going to decrease mad deterrence. I'm not going to get into explaining that all again if you don't understand that. 2016, right after we celebrate the opening, we go and have groundbreaking for the ABM system in Poland. Again, that increases the U.S. nuclear threat to Russia. We're jamming them with a nuclear threat. Then in 2017, U.S. passes the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CAATSA. For example, slapping sanctions on companies providing goods, services, technology, information, or support, right? Including all the subcontract. For Russia's hydrocarbon projects, like the Nord Stream 2, their deep water drilling project, Arctic and shale projects. So basically they're attacking Russia's gas economy, right? So once again, Americans aren't going to blink an eye. They're not going to pay attention to this. Who cares, right? Right. But if it was done to us, they'd scream bloody murder, right? They'd run around with their hair on fire, screaming, right? All right, and then in 2018, U.S. Congress attacks Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline with sanctions. Then we do the same thing to the Turk Stream 2, right? Then in 2020, the U.S. State Department elaborates their, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act by expanding the sanctions to loans and investments. All right, so they're hitting the financial aspect of it now, expanding it. For construction, expansion, and modernization of the Nord Stream 2 and Turk Stream 2 pipelines. But it also adds this is also in there, it adds that it is not limited to financing or construction operations or goods, services, technology, information, or support. All right? So, I'm thinking, what do they mean by that? I mean, they're trying to make an ultimate loophole, a catch-all that, we can apply this to anything else we think up later. Pretty much. Right? All right, here's the Turk Stream 2 pipeline right there. That's a blue stream there. All right, and then the 16th attack upon them or threat to them is in 2019 and 20, the U.S. State Department courts Belarus with exchange of ambassadors. So we're getting a little cordial there. We had exchange of ambassadors, opening up formal relations with Belarus, right? And then we promised to provide 100% of oil and gas needs to Belarus at competitive prices. That's the quote from Pompeo. All right, so his Secretary of State is promising competitive prices. I'm not sure how they're going to do this, but this stinks of subsidizing, right? Which is going to be an aggressive attack by national resources of the United States on Russia, right? And it's easy to see how we could do that because we subsidize the oil industry like crazy already. I don't know why, right? Of all, they need subsidies less, right? All right, then shipments began in February of 2020, and then Pompeo visited about the same time, and then he said this, quote, the United States wants to help Belarus build its own sovereign country. All right, I mean, what the hell? Why does he say sovereign? This is definitely intentional. I mean, Belarus is a sovereign country. It's not controlled politically by Russia, right? Oh, but it's dependent upon Russia economically for resources. All right. So when he says sovereignty, right? He's really talking about, right, eliminating dependence on Russia. So it's about driving a wedge between Russia and Belarus, which is its sole client state to the West. All right. I mean, that's all I got left. So let's take a look at that. Russia is being pushed back on all fronts in the West with NATO expansion and in the Middle East with flipping client states. Yeah, we flip client states, right? I mean, they got nothing left except part of Syria. All right, so remember, this is a picture of the old Soviet Union and the East Bloc countries here, whatever, Warsaw Pact, whatever, right? Including Albania down here. All right. Well, what's happened to that? Well, NATO, these are all NATO. NATO has pushed into all those areas, all right, including ex-Soviet territory, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, here. All right. There's Poland, all this, okay, all part of NATO, including Albania and that Croatia down there, okay. Ukraine has annual joint exercises with NATO. I mean, only Belarus is kind of closely connected to Russia. It's its last remaining client state here in the West, and it's been cut into. U.S. is cutting. You think this is by accident? And you think they need Belarus with a crap economy, with a worthless economy, corrupt government? All right, they don't need Belarus. This is to jam Russia again. Right? We're not going to make any money off of freaking Belarus, subsidizing hydrocarbon sales to them. Right? All right. So here's the Middle East, okay? And all these client states are flipped. Traditional, during the Soviet era, right? All they got left is part of Syria, right? They're hanging on to scraps, right? So at least 16 times the USA has directly attacked or threatened Russia. These are undeniable facts. However, Americans will not want to believe this, and so many, if not most, won't. It's just like I proved absolutely that USA is a warmonger nation in a simple chart of all the damn wars we fight. Right, we're constantly fighting wars, war after war. Right, 2.77 wars every damn year. Right, and then that's attacked. Well, how do you attack simple, undeniable facts like that? Well, only in people's minds, because they can believe whatever they want to believe, despite the facts. Right? So they won't believe. They won't believe it. For people are highly adept at believing what they want to believe, despite all facts, evidence, and logic. Right? Facts? We don't need no stinking facts. Intelligence? We don't need no stinking intelligence. We got social reality waves. We can believe whatever we want to believe based on nothing. Right? Damned if Americans don't do that. So Americans want to believe the USA is always a good guy and some other nation is always a bad guy. But this is an undeniable pattern of U.S. instigation and aggression against Russia. All right? We point to their school elections. Man, we screw them so many times more. It's crazy. Among these many U.S. threats to Russia was the 2008 concerted U.S. threat to fast-track NATO membership for both Ukraine and Georgia at a time when 80% of Russian gas to Europe passed through Ukraine, and Ukraine was screwing Russia, stealing Russian gas, not paying for the gas they purchased, having big unpaid bills, piling up bigger and bigger, and then they're violating contract agreements too. Right? And at the same time, Europe and the USA were pushing hard to develop Caspian gas pipelines, right, to get that Shah Deniz field gas to Europe, which would all the pipelines would run through Georgia, right? So you know this pressure on Ukraine and Georgia are totally inextricably linked together. Boy, I was going to use the word indelible again. I don't know why. So NATO membership would provide NATO military umbrella that would, one, encourage more Ukraine bad behavior, two, place NATO even closer onto Russia's doorstep, let's see here. Here's Russia, right on their doorstep again. Okay, jamming them right on the. They share a large border there. Okay, and then Georgia too. Let's see here. Where was I? And then position NATO in Crimea, the most strategic point guarding the Black Sea. All right, so here's the Black Sea. Well, if you look at it, I could show this to like a 10-year-old kid. Hey, what's the most important point? What's the most important land point in the Black Sea? Down here. Well, actually, this is important. Yeah. Well, Crimea, obviously, right? Okay. The most strategic point in the Black Sea, guarding the Black Sea is Crimea, right? Which thus threatens Russia with the loss of all their strategic military bases in Crimea. For how would Russia and NATO coexist when the raison d'etre of NATO is defense against Russia? Right? That's the whole reason for the existence of NATO. Defend and fight Russia. Right? Well, we'll just hang out in Crimea together. Come on. And Russian bases in Crimea are essential to protect their maritime commerce, their Black Sea pipelines, and Russian territory. Now, the simple-minded argument against this is, well, wait a minute. NATO is not a defensive organization. It's a defensive alliance. All bullshit, right? This is a clear example of how NATO military umbrella can protect offensive economic aggression via gas against Russia. All right. So don't tell me a defensive organization. If it's a military alliance, it can be used aggressively, right? As you spread it. I bring to your attention this long, extensive pattern of U.S. attacks and threats to Russia to show you that the U.S. support for pro-Western groups in Ukraine no less targeted Russia, no less was directed at Russia to pressure Russia. And when the pro-West Euro-maiden movement, one, started a revolution, two, overthrew the elected Ukrainian government, and three, illegally seized power, well, that increased the threat of NATO membership. This is also a part of the long pattern of USA pushing Russia's buttons, jamming them onto their heels with a threat, forcing them to react, and when they react, we then portray that as evidence of Russia's dangerous expansionist ambitions. Right? I mean, we've been doing this crap forever. I taught you, for example, the Gulf of Tonkin. That's what they did in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Threat. When they react, oh, look at right? We need this congressional resolution, oh, which starts a damn war. Whole damn war, Vietnam War, based upon that. It is a repeated pattern of classic get you again games, oft played by the USA and especially the CIA, right? CIA plays this on individual people. I know that from personal experience. I don't want to get into that, right? Right? Normally, it's get you games, in my case, to get into hominem attack. Right? He's crazy. He's a liar. He's a false accuser. Don't believe him. Right? They play these games all the time. Same old game, right? Right? If you can't see it, I'm sorry, but they're real. You can't see it. That's not my fault. In response to this threat of a U.S.-supported pro-West Ukrainian group illegally seizing control of the government, Russia annexed Crimea, which was then exaggerated as evidence that Russia was hell-bent on aggressive military expansion westward into Europe to rebuild the glory days of the old Russian Soviet empires, right? I mean, this was actually passed, and it was actually believed by a lot of people, right? This was a dominant view, I swear, right? You may laugh at it today, but, I mean, did it work? Absolutely. People are simple-minded suckers. Proof of the effectiveness of this narrative is one, the post-Crimean incident, annexation incident, deployment of NATO enhanced forward presence units. These 1,000-man U.S. forces in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland to serve as tripwires, right? Deterrence to Russian military invasion. All right. I mean, the idea is you set these guys up to be sacrificed. If Russia attacks, well, these guys are going to get bloody, right? But that's going to trigger a massive U.S. response, right? So this is, I have no problem with this, right? Because this is 1,000-man forces, half a regiment. I mean, they're not destabilizing. They're no threat to anyone, right? But if you attack them, oh man, all hell's going to come down on you from the USA. You know that, right? I'll be all pissed off wanting to get back. Anyways. Okay. Yeah, so it's a deterrent. 2, shift in U.S. defense budgets directed at the Russian threat. All right, so the budgeting now is shifting away from terrorism towards Russia and China, a great power. So here's the DoD budget of 2017, right? Big nuclear buildup rationale. Quote, we are countering Russia's aggressive power directed at Russia, right? Russia, what? Because it took Crimea, right? We'll talk about the Donbass also, how that's being blown out of proportion. Through investments in a broad range of capabilities, the fiscal year 2017 budget request will allow us to modify and expand air defense systems, develop new unmanned air system, design a new long-range bomber, that's the stealth B-21, and a new long-range standoff cruise missile, that's the AGM-86, and modernize our nuclear arsenals. That's a $1 trillion project here. Over $1 trillion. That's a hell of a lot of money, right? Just for the nukes. All right. And then 2020 Defense Department budget statement likewise shifted emphasis from terrorist groups and rogue states to great power aggression. Right. That's a quote they use. Quote, deterring or defeating great power aggression is a fundamentally different challenge than the regional conflicts against rogue states and violent extremist organizations that were our day-to-day challenges for much of the last 25 years. So all of this is evidence that the annexation of Crimea has caused a sea change, a major shift in U.S. policy towards new Cold War crap, new great power, standoff crap. So this is the shift to a new Cold War, i.e. great power conflict and confrontation. So this fantastic and ridiculous exaggeration up here, Russia's hell bent on creating its new empire, restoring its empire, was parroted by numerous politicians, including guys like John McCain, military men like General Petraeus, and the press like this Soviet Pinkham, right? Right, in a Guardian article, right? I mean, these guys, this is just a sample of guys. It's parroted by a whole bunch of guys. So this notion is idiotic comedy. So arguably, I say easily arguably, the most powerful event that created this ridiculous belief that Russia is a dangerous menace hell-bent on expansion to rebuild the glorious Russian Empire, right? Which is bullshit, was their annexation of Crimea in 2014. But was it really offensive and expansionist, right, taking Crimea? Or was Russia once again jammed with the threat of NATO expansion, shoved back onto their heels, forced to scramble and react to hang on so as not to lose any more? I mean, look, Russia's being jammed back everywhere. They're being jammed back again, right? They want to hang on to Crimea because it's important. And so I say here, especially the critical bases within Crimea. Russia was once again being reactive and defensive and only portrayed by the USA as an expansionist aggressor intent on rebuilding its old glorious empire so that the USA can fuel a new Cold War. Right? Question, was Russia trying to gain or were they trying not to lose? Right? They already had the bases. Their seat of bases in the Black Sea is in Crimea. Where else? Well, you know, that's a chief place there. Right. And they had them since 1772. Going back to 1770. What is that? That's like, that's 250 years. 248 years. Come on. So how did the Russian annexation of Crimea come about? Right. I'm going to reveal this in 3 layers. So here's the first layer, short version. I'll do it like layers of an onion, deeper and deeper, more and more. I think it'll be better understood that way. So here's the overview. All right, between February 18th and 23rd of 2014, the Euro. Now, why do I have Euro twice here? The Euro-Maidan Revolution overthrew the Ukrainian government and seized power. All right. The fact that the new installed government was pro-West increased the risk Ukraine will join NATO. This was a USA-backed group. In an all-night meeting held on February 22nd and 3rd, Putin concluded saying, we must start working on returning Crimea to Russia. Now, the key word there is returning, because in the Russian view, and historically, and in every other way, right, Crimea belonged to Russia. All right. So now I'm going to give you a little bit more background, an extra layer that goes back to 2012, right? But remember, U.S. direct involvement in Ukraine goes back at least as far to 2004 Orange Revolution, right? We had NGOs operating there way back during the 2004 revolution. Okay, then March 30th of 2012, Ukraine and the EU get together and begin negotiations to, like joining the European economy, right? An association agreement. And Ukraine asks for a 20 billion euro loan. All right, okay. Then about a year and a half later, November of 2013, following year, the EU presents its offer and they say, okay, we're going to give you 0.061 billion loan. All right, that's only 3%, 3 pennies on a dollar for what they're asking. All right, that's all they're giving them. Plus, they're giving them all sorts of demands, all sorts of conditions. Big cuts in government spending, 40% increase in natural gas price, and changes to Ukrainian laws and regulations. Right? So what does this sound like? To me, this sounds exactly like big cuts in government spending. This is IMF austerity program stuff. Right? This is tighten your belt and go on a starvation diet. Okay, so then the Ukraine Prime Minister Mykola, whatever, called this, quote, extremely harsh conditions, right? And then he decided to take Russia's deal instead, which was much better. Russia's offering $15 billion loan, approximately 25 times larger than the EU offer, and then continuation of cheap gas, not a 40% increase. So they got cheap gas still, and no other demands on laws and regulations and so forth. Right? All right, so it's a much sweeter deal. So the very next day, November 21st, the Ukrainian government rushed to announce suspension of the association agreement with the EU and acceptance of Russia's offer. This immediately ignited the Euromaidan protests. They got all crazy up in arms, which then escalated to seizure of government buildings, right? Threatening government shutdown. These are government buildings in Kiev, the capital, right? So they're probably including federal government buildings too, not just local municipality. I got to look that up, what government buildings. Anyways, that's less critical. They're taking government buildings in the capital. And threatens government shutdown, right? And street violence erupts, and then there's a revolution, and then there's a coup takeover, illegal seizure of power by a pro-West government, right? That's just great. And this is kind of like a note here. I say this was amateurish population control, a much better method, right? You delay final statement here, and two, you have a subordinate, like a cabinet official, hint at a possible rejection of the EU deal and acceptance of Russia deal in order to precondition acceptance through cathartic cycles, right? You jack them up, get them fear and angry, right? Then you take them back down, jack them up again, take them back down, you do it again, right? And then they're pretty much, after a while, they get it out of their system, right? Right, and they're like, "What?" They're like even confused as far as what the hell's going on here. So you have an underling, a lower cabinet official releases information, and then the president immediately steps up and says, "Hey, okay, hey, wait a minute, right? Right, that's not true at all, right? So the president immediately denies this and states, that was premature. We're studying the offer right now, and we promise to give you information as we figure things out here." So then they start releasing elements of the EU offer, combined with insults to national pride, insults to sense of fairness, right? And appeals to self-interest. Why self-interest is powerful, right? If you tie this to people's individual self-interest, man. Right. Release elements of Russia's offer, right, showing all the economic benefits, while at the same time avoiding the EU imposed hardships that they're going to have to suffer through. All right. So, man, this is going to be a much better deal. Just think of all the hardships you'd be faced with that the EU's demanding. Following this, the president makes an ambivalent hint of accepting the Russian deal. Again, this is part of the jacking up, the catharsis, but also creating some confusion and uncertainty, right? And it's just wearing on the people, right? It's like, well, and after a while they're just tired of this whole issue. After about a 4-day cycle, the president formally announces acceptance of the Russian deal, stating the reasons and benefits to all parties in simple, clear terms, right? Just keep it real simple, emphasizing the benefits over the EU deal. So the overall effect is you precondition the population, and you have multiple cathartic cycles, which dissipates emotions, anger, fear, and to a certain extent desensitizes the masses, right? They're already familiar with this, and it's like, So in response to that's ideally how it works, right? In response to Azarov's announcement, protests immediately erupted. Government buildings in Kiev were seized, and on February 18th, violence flared, resulting in 130 deaths, including 18 police officers. Right, so it's 112 of the protesters. Actually, they're civilian, 112 civilian deaths, because there could have been pro-government people, who were injured too. This sparked or killed. This sparked the revolution, forcing the Ukrainian government to flee. And then on February 23rd, the pro-West Euromaidan group seized power, increasing the threat of NATO membership. And then on the 22nd and 23rd, Putin held an all-night meeting, and he concluded saying, "We must start working on returning Crimea to Russia." Then on the 23rd of February, pro-Russian demonstrations were held in the Crimean city of Sevastopol. That's the main city in the sea coast there. On 27th February, massed Russian troops occupied Crimea, which led to an installation of a pro-Russian Crimean government, which then held a referendum on 16 March, and 97% voted for Crimea to join Russia, with a voter turnout of 83%. So this is a damn high popular mandate to join Russia. So then 2 days later, Russia annexed Crimea. All right. So let's go back even further and look at the Russian perspective. All right. No one does that. Okay. They're just saying, "Oh, they took Crimea. That means they want to take the rest of Europe." Like, come on. All right. I mean, you're going to see how ridiculous this is. So Crimea is the key strategic point on the Black Sea, with its central location, protrusion out into the sea, and good natural ports. All right. Sevastopol is an excellent port. All right, that's why the main Russian naval base is there. Crimea is also the site of multiple Russian military bases, reaching back to 1772. That's 248 years, with the development of Sevastopol Naval Base during the Russo-Turkish War. Historically, the obvious strategic value of Crimea made it an object of control by Greeks, Romans, Byzantiums, Ottomans, Russia, then, Britain, France with the Crimean War, and then Nazi Germany. Crimea's economy is dominated by agriculture, with less significant industries, right? So it doesn't really have much of an economy here. It's mostly agrarian, right? Its real economic value to Russia lies in its protection for Russia's hydrocarbon pipelines, protection of its maritime commerce, and protection of its territories, all right? So Crimea is an irredenta, right? Which means it's a territory that is in one country but really belongs in another. By all measures, Crimea belongs in Russia. Ethnic, political, historic, racial, national identity. So 68% of the population of Crimea is ethnic Russian. Only 15.7% is ethnic Ukrainian. That's greater than 4-to-1 Russians to Ukrainians. The remaining is 12.6% Tatar. Linguistically, 77% of Crimeans speak Russian, but only 10% speak Ukrainian. That's roughly an 8-to-1 ratio of Russian to Ukrainian speakers, right? The Crimean Constitution states Russian as the official language of Crimea. All right. Historically, Crimea has belonged to Russia since 1783, which solidifies Russia's claim over Crimea. All right. Now, Crimea was transferred to Ukraine in 1954 under dubious conditions. We'll talk about this here. There's 5 of them. Keep that in mind. There's 5 dubious, things here. So Crimea was transferred to Ukraine when Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union. So that did not represent a tangible loss of Ukraine, more a mere formality, right? And that made the transfer palatable, eliciting little resistance. And then Crimea was gifted by Khrushchev, who had strong sympathies with Ukraine. Right? Khrushchev was born there, raised there, he worked there, and then he married a Ukrainian woman, and then he held he was head of the Communist Party of Ukraine from 38 to 49, before he became the head of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. All right. After 3 years of civil war between Western Ukraine and the Soviet Union, all right, so Western Ukraine is fighting the Soviet Union, all right, 46 to 49. Quote, I took this from the Wilson, what is it, the Wilson study? I don't know. I forget. Quote, Khrushchev saw, excuse me, I got a cough here, okay, I'm back. Sorry about that, I had a cough. Yeah. So Ukraine is rebelling against the Soviet Union. They're fighting, right? And then Khrushchev saw the transfer of Crimea as a way of fortifying and perpetuating Soviet control over Ukraine, now that the Civil War had finally been won. All right? Soviet Union finally won it. Thusly, the transfer was symbolic, conducted on the 300th anniversary of the Treaty of whatever that word is, right? Which first allied Ukraine with Russia. In short, the transfer was an expedient move to cement ties with Ukraine, right? And you know, the way Khrushchev's trying to throw them a bone, saying, oh, here, take Crimea, right? Quit giving us trouble, right? You know, take Crimea. All right. The transfer vote was made by the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet, which is the legislative body, and not the Supreme Soviet, right? So the Supreme Soviet was in recess, right? They're out, right? So when they're out, the Presidium, a smaller group of representatives, right? It runs a show here, okay? And according to Articles 14 of 18 of the Soviet Constitution, any change to borders could only be made by the Supreme Soviet and not the Presidium. Also, the Crimean people population was denied any say in the matter. This is according to Anton Bieber. You can look him up. The transfer vote by the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet was illegal because it was made without a quorum, since only 13 of 27 members were present. You know, that's less than half. You need at least 14 to get a quorum, to get a valid vote, right? I mean, you know, you can have like, if you don't do that, you can have like one guy there. All vote, and okay, we'll decide based on what I wrote on. All right, the transfer of Crimea to Ukraine in 1954, when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, did not represent a loss of Russia. However, with the breakaway of Ukraine in 1991, Boris Yeltsin unexpectedly did not return Crimea to Russia. Right? I mean, the way I'm seeing it, right, it's almost like, you know, Ukraine's breaking away. They're making their getaway attempt here, right? And they're getting away with their loot, right? The loot is Crimea. I mean, that's the way you can look at it, right? I don't know. Maybe that's excessive. Maybe that's not valid. Maybe that's not fair. I don't know, right? But it seems that way to me. You know. I mean, this is all, you know, dubious here, right? Crimea belonged to Russia since 1873, or 1783. The transfer of Crimea, right. There were multiple attempts by Crimea to break away from Ukraine, each squashed by Ukraine. So Crimea doesn't even want to belong to Ukraine, right? It rather belonged to Russia, the Crimean people. In August 91, that's when Ukraine declared independence from the Soviet Union. But following this, the next year, Crimea Parliament declared independence from Ukraine and passed the first Crimean Constitution. This is an act of independence. The Ukrainian Parliament immediately intervened and annulled the Crimean Declaration of Independence. So Ukrainians squashed it. All right. Then in June of 92, a compromise was reached, and Crimea was designated an autonomous republic within Ukraine. But they still weren't satisfied, and in May of 94, the Crimean Parliament voted again to restore the 1992 Constitution, and thus Crimean Declaration of Independence. Also, in 1994, there was a Crimean referendum passed, and three things were voted for. Increased autonomy, 78% voted for that. Dual citizenship, Ukraine and Russia, 83% voted for that. That's moving towards Russia. All right, they want to be part of Russia. This is inching their way to integration with Russia. And then independent Crimean laws, 78%. This is another sneaky inching their way towards independence, right? What it was something like this. It's something like the president's edicts can be made into Crimean law. Whatever the president says, right? So that's creating independent Crimean law, independent of Ukraine, right? And if you have independent laws, or if you don't follow Ukrainian laws, either way, that's tantamount to sedition, right? That's tantamount to revolution. That's tantamount to Declaration of Independence. All right. In March of '95, Ukrainian Parliament abolished the 1992 Crimean Constitution and the position of the Crimean president. So they're squashing it again, removing the pro-Russian president Meshkov. Right? They squashed their independence attempts here. All right, then popular resistance against Ukraine and NATO broke out in 2006 after U.S. Marines landed in the Crimean city of Feodosia. Right about there. Here's Sevastopol. That's their main base over there, naval base, right? To take part in Operation Sea Breeze, a joint Ukrainian-NATO exercise. Protesters blocked the Marines with barricades and shouted, "Occupiers, go home." 2 days later, the Crimean Parliament declared Crimea a NATO-free zone, a quote, NATO-free zone. After several days of protests, U.S. Marines withdrew from Crimea. This is yet another NATO threat. Okay. In 2008, the U.S. made a concerted effort. You know about this. Senate, House, President, all combined, pushing hard to get, two resolutions to fast track NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia with a MAP, that's it, membership action plans, accelerated membership, posing a strategic threat to Russia's gas economy. All right. Then in 2014, there's a referendum to join Russia. Was a shoo-in, given widespread anti-Ukrainian, pro-Russian sympathies of the population, past Crimean attempts to break away from Ukraine and join Russia, and Crimea's historical possession by Russia since 1783. Putin may have even thought he could pass off the vote as democratic, popular. I mean, after all, the Crimean people overwhelmingly pro-Russian, and the results of the March 16th referendum showed that 97% wanted Crimea to join Russia, right, with an 83% voter turnout. That's an overwhelming majority. But to get the vote, Russia must insert military force. So this is the part that's not kosher. This is offensive, but keep in mind, right, that Putin was not initiating. Putin was reacting to a threatened loss of its military bases in Crimea. The West labels this an offensive military aggression and evidence of Russian intent to rebuild its empire, which is a complete joke in terms of, one, the NATO threat posed to Russia initiated the whole thing. Two, Russia was not initiating, Russia was reacting defensively. Three, historic Russian claims to Crimea. Four, Crimean irredentism in all ways across the board. Crimea belongs in Russia. No neighbors worth taking. So this is looking at expanding into the West, right? So why would Russia do that, right? So let's take a look at the map here. Where the hell? Okay, here's Russia. Okay, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Russian Empire included these territories. They're gonna, they want to recreate their empire. Take Estonia. These are all crap economy. Moldova. Every single one of these is a crap economy. Every single one of these has like little or no resources, right? Belarus is heavily dependent upon Russia, right? As Ukraine was, right? You don't get to something half decent until you get to Poland, right? I mean, even these are, menial economies. So let's take a look. Finland was not part. I'm going to skip Finland because that was not part. Finland has joint exercises with NATO, and anyways. So look at this storm. Look at the size of these GDPs. They're minuscule. Okay, and then they have very little resources. All right. Ukraine's got a little bit of oil and gas, but I mean, why does Russia need it? They got tons of it, right? Plus, they're members of NATO here, right? I mean, give me a break. They're not going to get anything out of these countries, right? Why would you bother? You're not going to gain. You're not going to benefit from it. No neighbors worth taking. Plus, some of them are part of NATO, right? Which means, right? Especially with 1,000-man tripwires there, Russia goes trying to take Estonia for whatever reason. I mean, there's no reason why they want to take Estonia. Why? GDP is like 41 billion. Right? They're part of NATO. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Russia lacks military capacity. All right, it couldn't even do it. Right? I mean, recreate its empire, it's going to have to take multiple states. All right, that's going to be multiple proxy wars. They're going to be spread thin. Even if they go into one, they're going to be bogged down in a proxy war quagmire. Right? Create their whole empire. That's crazy. Russian vulnerabilities, especially in the Russian Islamic Caucasus. All right, so Russia's got a soft underbelly in the Caucasus, right? For example, Chechnya. 4 times Chechnya has tried to break away. Make it 5. There's 2 Russian Chechen wars, right? If you split them in 2, right? Russo-Japanese War. Russia goes to war with Japan. Well, Chechnya says, okay, cat's away, we might as well play. We're free. We're breaking free. Right? World War I, same thing. Cat's away, might as well play. We're going to break free. World War II, same thing. Chechnya tries to break away. Right? Then the Soviet Union falls apart. Chechnya tries to break away. Russia's got to fight 2 Chechen wars. Right? First one they lose to Chechnya. That's crazy. Right? You lose into a little province within your country. It's like a postage stamp. Not even a postage stamp in your country. All right. Yeah, the great Russian military threat. Immediate economic. It's going to suffer immediate economic blowback and sanctions. All right. To get what? Nothing. Don't give me that. They want to rebuild their empire. For what reason? It's stupid. You're not going to get anything worth taking, and you're just going to get whacked. All right, I'll talk more about details of what will actually happen. Scenario. I mean, it's far more involved. I can't give it all here. After Russia annexed Crimea, Europe and the U.S. slapped sanctions on Russia. The Russian economy takes a hit, and Putin orders a shift away from the West and towards the East, specifically China, which likely creates in the minds of congressmen, right? And even the public, maybe, the image of a bigger, badder boogeyman. Ooh, right? Now it's 2 guys together combined. A bigger Cold War threat. And historically trading blocks, right? Were threats. I don't like these trading blocks, those autarkic trading blocks, right? was part of the pre-World War II fuel that fueled the coming World War II. Germany had a trading bloc. Japan had a trading bloc with its co-prosperity. Britain always had a trading bloc, right, with their Commonwealth, right. Now, German and Japanese trading blocs were formed due to the breakdown of trade in 1930. With the Smoot-Hawley tariff, all right. Great Britain's trading bloc has been more long-term historical development, through mercantilist policies. Add to that the Russian-China currency threat. Russia and China trying to, bypass the petrodollar here. On the part of the USA, this is anti-strategic. It's anti-divide and conquer. I mean, it's just stupid. Any military person knows that a fundamental strategy is divide and conquer. You want to split your enemy. More than that, you want your enemies fighting each other. Okay? You want to set them in opposition to each other, right? Not bring them together. This is stupid, right? Anti-strategic. So let's go through a summary of the Crimean issues here. By all measures, Crimea is an irredenta that naturally belongs within Russia, ethnically, linguistically, national identity, affiliation, national aspirations, politically, historically, part of Russia since 1783. Military bases, Russia had military bases since 1772. Russian blood shed for Crimea in 4 wars. All right. 68% of the population is ethnic Russian. Only 15.7% is ethnic Ukrainian. Greater than 4-to-1 ratio. Right. As far as language, the dominant language spoken at an 8-to-1 ratio is Russian over Ukrainian. Crimea was part of Russia since 1783. And really up to 1991, all right, because in '54 it was officially assigned to Ukraine, but really the breakaway occurred in '91 because it was all part of the Soviet Union back then. All right, Crimea was officially transferred to Ukraine in '54 under highly questionable conditions, gifted by Khrushchev for either reasons of sympathy or offering Ukraine a bone so that they stop fighting and rebelling. It's an expedient means of forging unity after 3 years of civil war. Approved by the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet and not by the Supreme Soviet. And there was no quorum for the vote, with only 13 of 27 legislators present. The transfer to Ukraine occurred when Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union, so the 1954 transfer was more a formality and did not represent a real loss until Ukraine broke away in 1991. That made the 1994 transfer, the 1954 transfer palatable. Multiple times the Ukrainian people have tried to break away from Ukraine, and each attempt was crushed by Ukrainian intervention. Right, so the Crimean people trying to break away, and Ukraine says, I don't think so. Screw that. The vast majority of Crimean people are pro-Russian, and 97% voted to join Russia in a referendum in which there was an 83% voter turnout. Crimea has been the site of Russian military bases going back to 1772. And that's due to Crimea's obvious strategic, well-placed position. Crimea is the most strategic point in the Black Sea. Central location, protrusion out into the sea, good ports for naval bases. Russians have shed blood for Crimea in 4 wars: the Russian-Turkish War, the Crimean War, World War I, and World War II. Right? Russia has been threatened with integration of Ukraine into NATO going back to 1997, with the first annual Sea Breeze joint Ukrainian NATO exercise. The risk increased substantially in early 2008 with the United States' big concerted push to get Ukraine and Georgia into NATO. Right? jamming Russia with a gas threat. The risk of Ukraine joining NATO again increased and substantially when in 2014 the pro-Western Euromaidan group conducted a revolution in Ukraine and stole power. This threatened Russia with loss of all their Crimean military bases and thus moved Putin to, quote, return Crimea to Russia. Right? In their view, Crimea rightfully belongs to Russia. In the view of the Crimean people, Crimea rightfully belongs in Russia. All right. Strategic importance of Crimea. So since the rule of Peter the Great way back, right, and for the next 200 years, Russia's foreign policy was dominated by a quest to develop access to maritime routes. All right. And now they have four, I guess you could call four maritime outlets. One is the northern here, Murmansk, then St. Petersburg, then, Black Sea, then Vladivostok in the east, right? This was connected eventually by the Trans-Siberian Railroad, heading from Moscow. Where's Moscow? Somewhere around here. Heading all the way to here. It went through Mongolia here, cut across there. All right, that's when they tried to. That's when Asia was being, a race to carve up Asia and to expand, colonial domination of Asia was going on there. So Russia is a landlocked nation. It's landlocked. I mean, you think of all this sea around it. Well, you can't trust this up here. It's all iced over, right? Vladivostok, they finally get to a warm water port here. These are warm water ports, all right? But other than that, it's landlocked, except for 3 constricted maritime routes here, and of course, Vladivostok. Now these routes are constricted. They're easily blocked. These are classic choke points here: the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, right? In the Baltic Sea, you got the Skagerrak Straits there. Black Sea, to get out of there, you got to go through the Bosphorus, Dardanelles, right? So Vladivostok is open, but it is isolated, distant from Russia's eastern production base. Its production industrial bases out here. Right, evidence of Crimea's strategic value is found in the concentration of military bases packed within Crimea. And look at all these bases. Here's a missile base. Here's a naval base. An air base. Another air base. Here's an air base. Here's the main Russian Black Sea Fleet base, Sevastopol. Coast Guard base. Military base. Air base. Military base. Marine base. Air base. Air base. It's packed full of military bases. Why? Because it's obviously the most strategic point in the Black Sea. Look at that. Right? I mean, it's obvious. So the strategic value of Crimea, it's somewhat analogous to Italy in the Mediterranean. Italy dominates east-west maritime traffic in the Mediterranean. You can cut it off if you want here. Just right. And this is what Admiral Mahan said. He said, Italy would dominate the Mediterranean if it were not for the fact that the British took Malta. All right, and that's Admiral Mahan, who was a pretty smart fellow. All right, to negate Italy's domination of the central Mediterranean. That's why they took Malta. All right. Okay. Where am I at here? 5. Okay. Now, everyone knew the strategic importance of Crimea. Going back to the ancient Greeks, Romans, Byzantium, Ottoman Empire, they're all taking Crimea, right? Russia, then Britain, France, then Nazi Germany, right? All trying to get Crimea. The strategic value of Crimea for Russia. The strategic value of Crimea for Russia. Lies in its protection of Russian hydrocarbon pipelines. Yeah, okay, you got the Turk streams and you got the Blue Stream. Maritime commerce going through here, or wherever they're coming from, I don't know. the Azov or over here somewhere. And territorial defense. Okay, here's Russian territory. These strategic benefits would all be flipped into threats were Crimea to fall under NATO control. All right, so here's the last bit of it. Here's the interim summary. Again, this is the second part of the lecture. Getting more detail, especially Donbass, Eastern Ukraine conflict, and then U.S. NGOs, right? All right. So interim summary. Number one, Russia's annexation of Crimea is the key trigger that is fueling this new Cold War. Two, but Russia wasn't initiating. Russia was reacting. Three, the USA has been instigating with 17 attacks or threats on Russia. Right? Four, annexing Crimea has zero correlation with expanding into Western Europe. Right? Expanding west. Not Western Europe. Expanding to the west to recreate the glorious Russian Empire. Right? I mean, there's zero correlation with this. One, Crimea is an irredenta that belongs in Russia. The popular will in Crimea is to join the Russian Federation. Russia's objectives were highly limited, and we're only trying to maintain possession of the military bases in Crimea. Right? It was not gaining, but rather trying to hold on to something. And then we got to look at the benefits cost ratio of attacking West. Well, there's nothing really worth taking. All right, they're going to be hit. Russia's going to be immediately hit by sanctions. They're going to be bled dry in multiple proxy wars. You got to fight multiple proxy wars. Russia's going to be spread thin. Hell, they had trouble taking Georgia. They had trouble with Chechnya. Plus, they'd be going against some NATO member countries, right? And Russia has crap military capacity and poor troop morale. About 75% of their, force structure are these one-year conscripts. These guys, they don't give a damn. They don't want to be there. They're just forced to do this 1 year. What are they going to learn in 1 year? Nothing. What do they want to try to learn? Nothing. And you have a major military operation, especially on multiple fronts in multiple countries, right? You're going to have to use these guys. And these guys are going to be ineffective. And they're going to be sent home in body bags in mass, right? Right? And then Russia's soft underbelly is going to break free in the Caucasus, Chechnya, maybe even the other Islamic provinces down there. Remember, after the Second Chechen War, Second Chechen War, there was a forging together of the Caucasus Emirates, right? All the Islamic provinces down there getting together. And then I fully expect domestic political backlash if they take such goofy, irresponsible, expansionist military operations, and all these kids coming back in body bags. That there's going to be a big backlash. There's going to be a big outcry, political instability. Somewhat like what happened during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Right? That played a part in the breakup of the Soviet Union. And I believe that the main thing, breakup of the Soviet Union, was written in the DNA of communism. Communism was basically just a dysfunctional economic system, right? Had its own demise written in its DNA, right? But this accelerated it, all right? The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, they do the same thing. You're going to have political instability within Russia. Who knows what's going to happen? All right, so that's part one. We're going to get more detail here. I think that's enough information. Okay, it's going to be hard enough to retain as it is. It's a lot of information. All right.